All right, so you see these headlines, right, about tariffs and trade wars and the stock market going haywire, and honestly, it can feel like trying to read a foreign language.
Yeah, can feel pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Like, what do tariffs even mean for your investments? How does this impact us regular people just trying to make sense of the financial world?
That's exactly what we're diving into today.
Today, we're going deep on tariffs.
And there's one trend we noticed. A lot of you are curious about tariffs in Canada. So get ready, because today we're going way beyond just the headlines. We're going to connect the dots.
We'll look at trade, international relations, and, yeah, your own portfolio, too. It's all connected, believe me.
You bet.
So first off, just looking at our search data, it's clear that this whole tariff thing, it's on a lot of people's minds.
Absolutely. Tariffs and stock market, those are some of the top searches we see. People want answers. They want to know how government policies like, imposing tariffs, how that's going to hit their own wallets.
Right.
Makes sense, right?
Totally. And, speaking of government policies, we saw a ton of searches related to Trump tariffs, tariffs Trump, Trump tariffs, all different spellings, but same idea.
Yeah.
That whole period really stirred things up, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. See, the Trump administration, they really went in a different direction with their trade policies. They were, pretty aggressive with those tariffs. It was a big shift from what the U.S. had been doing for, decades before that.
For sure.
For years, it was all about free trade agreements. Countries were working to lower barriers to trade, make it easier and cheaper to buy and sell stuff around the world.
Right.
But then suddenly, with all those tariffs, those barriers went back up. And you know what that does?
What's that?
It creates a whole lot of uncertainty and volatility in the markets. People get nervous, things start fluctuating, nobody knows what's going to happen next.
Yeah, no kidding. Which I guess explains why we're seeing all those searches for Dow Jones, S&P 500, NASDAQ, even stock market crash, right?
Yeah, it's a natural reaction to that kind of uncertainty.
People trying to figure out what it all means.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's take a step back for a second. Let's break it down to the basics.
Sure.
Can you explain, in simple terms, what a tariff actually is? Those searches for what are tariffs, what is tariffs,
Yeah.
tells me some folks need a little refresher course.
Okay, so imagine this. You're thinking about buying a car, right?
Okay.
But it's made in another country. Now, a tariff is like an extra tax that gets added on to the price of that car because it was imported.
Oh, I see.
So say you've got a 25% tariff on a car that costs $20,000.
Okay.
Suddenly, that car is going to cost you $25,000. That's a pretty big difference, and you can bet it's going to influence what people decide to buy. It can have a huge impact on whole industries, even.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So then what happens when countries start, throwing these tariffs back and forth at each other? That's when we get a trade war, right?
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like a tit-for-tat thing. One country raises tariffs, then the other one retaliates, and it can easily escalate out of control.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act back in the 1930s?
Vaguely.
It was supposed to protect American farmers, but it ended up triggering this massive global trade war, which a lot of economists believe actually made the Great Depression even worse.
Yikes.
So, yeah, when we see all those searches for trade war, it's understandable that people are worried. It's not exactly a good sign.
Definitely not. And, it's interesting. Our research showed a ton of searches specifically about Canada. Canada tariffs. Even Trudeau was popping up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like people are really curious about how all this is impacting our neighbors to the north.
Well, yeah, I mean, the U.S. and Canada, we've got this really close relationship.
For sure.
I mean, we share the longest undefended border in the whole world, and our economies are super intertwined. I'm talking deeply integrated. Think about it. In 2022 alone, the U.S. exported over $350 billion worth of goods to Canada, and we imported over $390 billion from them.
Wow, that's a lot of back and forth.
Right. That's a massive amount of cross-border trade, and even small changes in tariff policy, they can have a huge impact on that flow. It's a delicate balance.
And on top of that, we've got USMCA, right? That new trade agreement that replaced NAFTA. Is that playing a role in all of this?
Oh, absolutely. The whole point of USMCA was to modernize trade rules between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico.
Right.
But, it also included some provisions that could make it easier for the U.S. to slap tariffs on Canadian goods under certain conditions. So, yeah, Canadian businesses and policymakers, they're definitely paying close attention to how this all plays out.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, we've talked a lot about the big picture stuff, but let's bring it back down to earth for a second.
Yeah.
What does all of this mean for you, our listener? Have you noticed prices changing because of these tariffs. And when you think about the things you buy on a regular basis, electronics, clothing, groceries even,
Yeah.
have any of those things gotten more expensive lately? Because these big global shifts, they can really hit close to home, you know? And understanding how it all works can help you make smarter decisions, not just as a consumer, but as an investor too.
Exactly. Let me give you an example. Canadian lumber, right? It's used a lot in home construction here in the U.S. If tariffs on that lumber go up, those costs get passed on to the home builders, and guess what? Eventually, they land on you, the home buyer.
Ah, that makes
But
sense.
it's like a domino effect. It starts with these trade wars, and it ends up affecting your wallet.
So the takeaway here is even if something seems like it's happening far away, in the world of international trade,
Yeah.
it can still have a real impact on your everyday life.
Absolutely. What seems distant can hit close to home, for sure.
So what can we do? How can we stay ahead of the curve on this stuff? What should we be watching for?
Here's a thought. Look past those attention-grabbing headlines and start focusing on the industries and companies that are being directly impacted by these tariffs. Are they finding ways to adapt? Are they passing on those extra costs to us, the consumers? When you understand the impacts on that smaller micro level, it can really help you make smarter choices when it comes to investing. And remember, the more you know about how tariffs work, the better prepared you'll be to navigate these complex economic waters.
Knowledge is power, right?
Exactly.
Well, on that note, I think we're about out of time for today. But as always, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you then.
Bye.